Alright, dead cold start. Very calm 35. That's 42. With the variable trim, you can start off trim down just like with an outboard or an inboard outboard, and the bow doesn't come up as much as it would. And then it allows you to trim out just a little bit, makes it faster, makes it so you can control the wake a little for skiers. Alright, 0 to 30, or I guess 3 to 30. 1001, 1002, 1003. Little less than 3 seconds. That's a pretty quick get up. I'm going to trim up a little bit, and we'll do a top end run right here in this stretch. Make this corner. Alright, let's open it up. This is the low speed control bar. It gives you neutral and reverse by using the bucket. Allows you to back up to right wherever you want to go, and will even allow you to keep the boat effectively motionless. All you have to do is pull all the way back for reverse, push forward just a little bit for neutral, and then to remove the bucket, and for full forward you just push it all the way down. Alright, we'll use the control bar down here to keep the boat at a slow pace to line up with the trailer. It's very easy to put on the trailer. We have a good bit of wind and a little bit of current. Get the bow around there. Okay, all All you got to do is get it between the two bunks. That wasn't the greatest job in the world, but all right, once it's there, you just give it a little juice, and that is a done deal. I want to take just a moment to explain a couple of the features of this unit. One of them is most people understand that with jet-powered boats, whether they be personal watercraft or boats, have no steering when you don't have any throttle applied. And the reason is that it's the thrust coming out of the unit that actually gives it the steering force. However, on this boat, there are these tracking fins on the side which are tied to the steering, so that when you turn to the left and the thrust is going this way, this will come in and the opposite side will come out, and that still pushes the back of the boat around so that you do have a little bit of steering even when you don't have throttle applied. And of course you can see everything works in the opposite direction when you go in the other direction when you turn to the right. Second thing is, this boat has ballast tanks, and that is to create a bigger wake by adding more and more weight to the back of the boat. Same technique used in full-on wakeboarding boats. I want to say that these tanks are probably something in the area of a couple of 100 gallons maybe. Maybe not quite that much, but or maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure. But I do know that you're putting probably a few 100 pounds of weight right on the back of the boat when you fill these ballast tanks up. That makes the back squat, and that makes the wake much taller so that you can do bigger tricks, get more air when you're wakeboarding. Obviously, this is designed to ski all the way around. This tow pile line actually has multiple positions. That's the full up position. You tie your rope here. These are removable. To remove these, you undo these clamps. They're independent, left side and right side. This pulls back and out and lifts away, and then there's just a regular sea-doo deck under there if you want to run without the ballast tanks on the boat. There are multiple storage compartments. The first is the glove box directly under the steering handles. Right now all that's in there are keys, but obviously you can put your wallet and what all else you might want to there. There is another large storage area under the entire front. Fire extinguisher up here. This is a dry box. Clamps on both sides, raises up. All this storage is dry. Here's a pack right here for your registration and other items that need to be with you whenever you go. This entire box will lift out of the boat. So you have lots of dry storage in that trunk. And then of course you have the engine compartment, which in this case is actually two different seat removal operations. The back seat, you lift this handle right here and slide it back. That gives you another storage compartment and an area where you can have motor parts. That's actually a spark plug on top of there, a picture of a spark plug. This is a second area which is accessed by removing the front portion of the seat. This is your motor. It's a supercharged 4-cylinder, 4-stroke Rotax motor. Lots of power, 215 brake horsepower in fact, which is an awful lot for what amounts to an 11-foot boat and change. And in a moment we will lift some more of this off so that we can get better access to the motor and do a spark plug analysis. Here's a huge point on this particular craft. It has a closed loop cooling system, and what that means is normally with most boats, water is drawn from the lake or the ocean or wherever you are and is run through the block, and that's how you get your water cooling. In salt water, that though is a very corrosive act to bring in the ocean to your engine block, and so this has a closed loop cooling system, meaning that the radiator fluid, and this is your holding tank for that fluid, actually never sees the lake, and the lake never sees the inside of the engine block. There's a heat exchanger where water from outside is used to cool the fluid which is actually going through the block, but this fluid is not highly corrosive, and so the engine should last much longer. Also, the reason I needed to take this shot is this center section has 4 bolts which, when removed, drops the intake, and then it can be lifted out after I take this away, and that's what gives you access to the motor. All this will be opened up in just a moment. Okay, the center section is out, and this is the intake apparatus down to the intercooler for the supercharger, but this is what gives you access to the motor itself. And as you can see, for 215 horsepower and the fact that it's a 4-stroke and supercharged, it's really not a large motor at all. I believe I mistakenly referred to this as a 4-cylinder either once or twice, but that's because I have Alzheimer's. These are actually 3-cylinder motors, but they are supercharged. They do have 215 horsepower, which is amazing to me. But what we're going to do is a spark plug analysis on the 3 plugs. They don't use spark plug wires in the normal sense. We have 2 leads and an electronic connector to a long boot that fits over the spark plug, which is way down in the center of the head, which I hope the camera can pick up now. But anyway, we'll withdraw those plugs out of all 3 and lay them out and take a look at them and make sure everything's burning correctly in the combustion chamber. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is an electronically controlled world, and in an electronically controlled world, unless something is seriously malfunctioning, the burn is always perfect, and those are some awfully good looking spark plugs. Not too rich, not too lean, no carbon, absolutely perfect. That's 1, 2, and 3 for cylinders 1, 2, and 3. Alright, now that I have the proper fitting, which I was missing the other day to be able to do a compression test on this motor, I have all the plugs out on the back, have all the coils and plugs out here, and to disarm the ignition so that we can turn it over and not create an ignition problem, we're going to put the boat into drown mode. With this ECM on this motor, all you have to do to get into drown mode, which disarms the ignition and the fuel system, is just simply hold the throttle open all the way for just a second, and now we're in that disengage mode where the ignition system won't be building up that excess voltage, which is always a problem for electronics. Remember, either disengage your ignition system or ground out all the plugs whenever you're doing an ignition, or rather a compression test on any motor. So we are into plug number 1. You can see we're at 0. I have it in drown mode. Now we're going to turn it over. Okay, that's just a little over 120 pounds. Just want to disengage the gauge. That beeping is the ECM going out of drown mode. Okay, we're at 0, into drown mode. Right at 120 again. Okay, 0, into drown mode. right at 120 pounds again. So the cylinders all are even. Remember, it's not even what your gauge reads when you're doing a compression test on a multi-cylinder motor. It is how even is the compression between the cylinders, and the reason is that gauges are different from each other and they can read different pressures, but if you have a problem, it'll show up because the pressure in one cylinder will be more than 10% off the pressure in the other cylinder. So this one's fine. Of course, that's expected with only 85 hours. Another thing that I want to mention, I didn't the other day indicate how the ballast tanks are filled. These are the drains for the ballast tank. If you want to run fluid, water, I guess I should say, in the ballast tanks, you simply screw in the plugs so that they're watertight. And their tubes, this is the swim ladder by the way, there are tubes down here which are connected to the jet pump, which allows water to come up into the ballast tanks. Now when you remove the ballast tanks, these are quick disconnect fittings. You simply slide back the collar and you can pull them loose. To put them back on, you just stick them in there and let that collar come back and they're locked in. Now, your valves are right here and here. 2 tanks, 2 valves. Right now they're in the closed position and that keeps water from coming into the tanks. If you want to fill the tanks up, you simply open up the valve and then the jet pump is pushing water up into the tanks until they're full. And that is how you add weight to the back. To drain that weight, pull the plugs. And there you have it. As I'm putting it back together, I realized that I didn't mention in that segment a moment ago, I didn't mention the absolute pressure on the readings. 120 pounds may seem a little bit low for a 4-stroke, but remember that the compression ratio on this motor is only 8.4 to 1 because it is supercharged. The normally aspirated version of this motor, which has 155 horsepower, has a 10.4 to 1 compression because it does not have a supercharger, and so the absolute pressure readings are going to be a lot higher on that motor. So because this is supercharged, it runs a lower compression ratio, but when the motor's running and the supercharger is packing air into the motor, it actually is as if it was a much higher compression ratio. You'll notice that all supercharged and turbocharged motors have lower compression ratios for that reason. Okay, I've got it all back together now. Just want to make sure that it all went back together right. Remember, don't put one of these in drown mode when you're trying to crank it up. Just let the computer do its job. Put in the key, and there you have it. Okay.